Hello everyone. Uh, let's welcome to another lakeFS community call. We are live, I believe, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and it's been an exciting week for us. We've got a new website, a new playground environment, and lots of new features in lakeFS to cover. This isn't super surprising. It's been almost 4 months since the last call we did like this. So we're going to cover, let me get the slide. I see. Okay. So here's the agenda. We've got Oz as well.
Hi, everyone.
So as you can see from the agenda, we're going to cover all of these things and a bit more.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Paul. So before we jump into all of it, I mean, we're versioning nerds. We like versioning. So I collected some statistics from our GitHub repository, and I'm going to do a little quiz for Paul and for anyone at home who might want to try and answer on the comments. So our last community call was last October, so about 3 months ago, almost 4 months ago. Obviously, a lot has happened in that time. So Paul, give me your best estimate. How much in? What's your guess?
Sorry, you actually started cutting out a little bit there. For me, at least, it could have been on my end. What am I guessing? And could be on my end, it could be Oz.
Yeah, I think that was me. Am I back now?
You're back.
Yay, sorry about that. Wi-Fi. Yeah, so I wanted to do a little trivia. So going back to the last community call 4 months ago, how many PRs have been merged into? What's your
How many
guess?
PRs have been merged? My guess for that is, I just hope not to be an order of magnitude off. I'll say 500,000.
Yeah, so you're a few orders of magnitude above the actual number. So the entire team, like the community behind lakeFS and the team here at Retrievers, so we merged 209 changes, that's bug fixes and new features into the lakeFS repository. So not your 500,000, which is something we should aspire to do maybe one day.
I'm an optimist.
But 209 features and bug fixes for 3 months, I think that's still impressive. So that's nice. So maybe I'll give you a chance to kind of redeem yourself. In terms of lines change, how many lines of code were added in that time frame?
Let's go with 79,680.
That's a very specific number, Paul. This time not as far. So the number is 39,386 lines added, and also 12,000 lines removed. So like the net weight that was added is around 20,000 lines of code. Which is still, I guess, for 3 months, pretty nice. So yeah, thanks for the intro. So today we're going to talk about what these 20,000 lines of code actually represent in terms of new features and new things we actually built. And of course, more about the community and stuff to come. So with that, I think we can get started, right, Paul?
Let's do it. Cool things released.
Yes. So we have a bunch of them this time. So first of all, before we even go into like things and features, so we have a cool new website, and part of that functionality of the website itself is a new lakeFS Playground. which is really exciting for us. So the playground is basically kind of a self-service environment that you can get just with a single click of a button. The idea here is to get the entire lakeFS experience without actually installing anything on your machine, without actually configuring anything. You click a button, you get your lakeFS installation set up for you, which you can abuse and feel free to use however you see fit for about 10 days. The idea here is kind of reduce the friction of getting started and testing out what lakeFS actually is and how it works with minimal effort. So this is a pretty big thing. We think it's a great tool for the community of people who are actually just getting started with lakeFS and looking to see how it fits their use case. Definitely the easiest way to get started. It's still something, right? It doesn't take away anything from the other ways of getting started. So you can still run the Docker Compose. You can still deploy it on your Kubernetes clusters or on an EC2 machine or however you like. But now you have another option, which is the playground. So I think that's really cool. Definitely something you should check out. So if you go to lakeFS.io, there's a button there to try without installing. This takes you to your own private lakeFS playground. Paul, anything you want to add about that? Anything I missed?
I love it. I remember my first week at lakeFS going through the deployment to ECS of a lakeFS installation, just to do the things that you can try out in the playground. And I would have loved if there was a clickable green button that did the same thing in a couple minutes.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So apparently not everyone is me. Not everyone loves running Docker containers on their local machines. Yeah, so now we have an easier way of doing that. So that's cool. So the next thing is that last community call we said this was coming. Now it's already here, and that is the DBT integration. So if you're a lakeFS user and you're using a current version as part of our command line tool, which is lakecdl or lakecuddle, Paul, how do you call it?
I have lately gone with lakecontrol.
Lakecontrol.
I don't know if that was intended with the initial initials of it, but it makes sense to me.
That's definitely the meaning. So the lakecontrol CLI command now has a new dbt subcommand, which basically lets you integrate into existing dbt projects. And the idea here is that dbt is an awesome tool for those of you who are not familiar. Getdbt.com. It's an amazing open source project where you can basically model analytics workloads using mostly SQL, and they give you a nice environment to kind of model your dependencies between tables and between views, to run experiments and to also run quality checks and tests. So it's a really cool project. With the lakeFS integration, you now get to run dbt tests before actually releasing transformations to production. Right, so one of the challenges, and we know this with data, is that it's very mutable by nature. Right, so the only way to kind of do integration or system tests is to transform your data, and then once it's out there, once it's already like released, only then can you actually test it. Especially when you talk about very large scales, and you don't want to copy all this data from one place to another. So dbt has a notion of dbt test, which lets you run those tests, but using lakeFS, you can run them on your own isolated branch. This way, if the tests actually pass, only then you would merge those changes atomically to your production branch. All right, so you get a very clean separation of concerns here. Whoever is running the transformation, right, this is a data producer. They would run the quality tests prior to releasing, and then data consumers would then consume it from the production branch only after it's been like validated and tested. Right, so the idea here is to give a very strong guarantee. Like if you're reading from production, it means it has already gone through this set of tests that you can like see the code of if you go to the dbt repository. So this is all documented of how to get started and how to connect the pieces. So we support dbt running with Spark and the Hive Metastore. And just check out docs.lakefest.io/integrations/dbt. This would be probably the easiest way to get started. Paul, have you tried using dbt? Have you ever used it?
I have played around with it, I would say, not in production. Um, we've written one blog post
Yeah.
describing the integration as well, and I think this is super powerful feature. I've seen on places like Reddit, the data engineering subreddit, people discuss the challenges with testing. So I'm planning to write another blog post going into even more detail, showing how this works and making it hopefully as clear as possible the benefits you get using this integration and how you can set it up yourself.
All right, that's amazing. I think so. Everyone should stay tuned for that blog post. I'm definitely waiting for it. Yeah, so that's the dbt integration. So this is live. Next up, so as part of lake control, I like it now. It feels powerful. Lake control. So we have a new command under lake control, which is called lake control annotate. This is kind of similar to git blame without being as passive aggressive in terms of terminology, I guess. So we called it annotate. By the way, lake cuddle blame is an alias for this. So if you like this kind of harsh language, you can still use it. The idea here is that like one of the biggest problems if you work with like large scale data lakes is that it's really hard to kind of track how data is changing over time, like who's actually modifying what. Um, so what Lake Cuddle Annotate does is basically just listing, right? So this looks kind of similar to if I would do like Lake Cuddle file system ls on a path. Only for every entry, it would show you the latest commit that actually modified that prefix or that path. All right, so this enables you to answer questions that are kind of really hard to answer otherwise, like who's actually writing to this table, right? Who added this partition and when? Why was this data set modified, right? So all these questions, which are typically like you have to do kind of reverse engineering and to dig through the code to kind of figure out. So using lakeCuddle annotate, you just give it a prefix or a path, and we just show you under that prefix, these are the paths that you have, these are the tables or partitions that exist, and here are the commits that last modified them. Right, so at least for me, knowing like from my history of like going through large data lakes, where I have dozens of tables with millions of partitions sometimes, being able to kind of track it back and see when was something modified and by who is something that's like really powerful, right? So think of this as amazing input if you have like a data discovery platform or like a lineage engine. This is an amazing thing to kind of plug into. All this information is really valuable. Paul, anything you want to add on this?
I agree. I can think back to times being on call, waking up at 3:30 in the morning, debugging data issues, and feeling like a private investigator trying to figure out what happened. Was it under normal circumstances? Was there some special thing that happened that someone made a change? And being able to surface this type of information makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure you have your own war stories to tell. Yeah, so I'm seeing in the meantime that we're getting some questions from the YouTube live feed. So stay tuned. We'll try to answer them. Feel free to post them in the meantime, right? On LinkedIn and on YouTube. We're live on both. All right, so kind of in the same spirit of lake control annotate, we also have lake control log, which now supports a given prefix. This is really similar to the way git log works, if you're familiar with that, where you can say, show me just the series of commits that modified this path. All right, so instead of a path, think about like tables or partitions or data sets in general. So sometimes a lakeFS repo would kind of encapsulate a few tables or maybe even an entire data lake. And sometimes we just want to see like the sequence of events that led to like a specific table being modified. So using lakecontrollog and giving it a prefix, we can now just filter the commit log just to the ones that actually modify that path. All right, so questions like who actually introduced the change here, or who's manipulating this and how often, right? If I go to that commit, I can see what other things were changed during that time period. And in many cases, we have a single owner to a set of tables. All right, think about data products, for example. Like I might have a table and then the same table, but kind of partitioned by another column, right? And they're both tightly coupled to each other. If I go to the commit modified one, I might see the changes that happen on the other. All right, so think of it for discovery as well. And this is something that's kind of not trivial to understand initially, but this is also super useful if you think about pre-commit hooks. Right, so in many cases, users would use a pre-commit hook to like put data quality checks or like schema validations. So here, if I just look at the log for that path and I say, okay, these are the modifications that happened to the table. And alongside that, I can see these are the checks that were checked for each one of those commits, right? Taking you back to the hooks that actually ran at the time, right? So I know exactly what changed and what validation happened during that change. Again, this is also something that's really powerful, like if you have a lineage system to plug this into, because this way it actually gives you kind of the history of changes that were applied to a table, right, which is very powerful.
I agree. It's almost.
Sorry, Paul.
It's it's almost like a mini lakeFS within lakeFS, or at least exposing it on a more granular level. Not just how has this entire collection of data or data set changed through commits, but being able to focus on one specific file or path of the data set and see that over time is it's interesting.
Yeah, useful. Exactly. So especially if we talk about like data products, right? We have a few kind of related tables that coexist within the same repository. So we're seeing more and more need, and we're introducing more and more functionality at the prefix level, or like at the table level, basically, to allow to kind of dissect history and understand it better for like a subset of the data. So this is exciting. The next thing, this is a really busy slide. Apologies to anyone who has any sense of aesthetics here. So we introduced kind of a few big improvements to the lakeFS UI. So on the left, if you kind of squint your eyes and try to focus on what's actually being presented. So one of the things that we've added is kind of an aggregated view for commits and for changes. Many times when we talk about data lakes and data in general, we don't care that much about like a specific object. We care about a partition or a directory or an entire table. And up until now, all we showed was like, here's the set of objects that were modified for that commit. So in recent versions of lakeFS, we support an aggregated view, which also lets you kind of collect statistics. So you could say for a given table, 300 files were added, 5 files were deleted, representing 20 gigabytes of new data that was added here. So just being able to look at it in more of an aggregated level and not an object level is a new functionality. Again, part of the UI for showing diffs, right? So commits, merges, you would see all of these there. Additionally, on the top right, so we have a new kind of UI component, a new tab in the UI for managing tags. So tags used to be available only through the API and the CLI. They're fully supported within the UI now as well. For those of you unfamiliar, tags in lakeFS work very similarly to the way they work in Git. So basically just taking a name and attaching it to a specific commit, right? Unlike a branch, it doesn't like advance. You can't modify a tag once you created it. This is great if you want to like pinpoint an experiment or a report that was extracted at a point in time, and then being able to reproduce it later. right? So if I have a customer who I'm sending a report to, I can take the input data, put a tag on it, say this is report 123. And then a year down the road, if someone asks, wait, this data might not look right, let's try and rerun this report, I know exactly which data was the input for it. So as long as the process is deterministic, I should get the same results if I'm running on the same tab. So being able to kind of work with this through the UI is definitely something that was a basic expectation by users, and now it's fully supported. So that's great. The last one on the bottom right, in this example, I'm showing changes that were applied to a CSV file. So we know that data lakes are not only just like Parquet and columnar compressed files. Sometimes we have like human readable formats like JSON and CSVs and TSVs. And in many cases, we have humans who actually end up editing them and might want to kind of review the changes to them. For smaller files, especially human readable ones like CSVs, we now support object level line-wise diffs. So basically just seeing the lines that were added or removed during a commit or a merge. So this is really powerful when like humans try to edit some configuration and maybe someone wants to review those changes without downloading the file and running the diffs themselves. So now we give you kind of a shortcut where you can just click to expand it through the UI and actually see what changed. Paul, have you had a chance to try that out?
I think I've mostly been using a later or an earlier lakeFS version, and I actually have not tried it out yet. But similar to the other features, I can think of, this replaces times where I was loading two files into data frames and running some sort of diff operation or like an accept query in SQL and seeing which rows were spit out. And there's a nice way to get the same result without having to go through all those steps.
Yeah, so that's definitely like one of the use cases here. Paul, are you more of a UI or CLI type of guy?
I am a UI at first. It'll take me about 10 to 15 times of going through the UI before I'll start to think maybe I should write a command for this that I can run in one thing. But it's not my first inclination.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of people around the data ecosystem are probably this way. I know I am, but makes sense.
Yeah, I've spent too much time clicking around the AWS UI, and I kind of vow to not do that as much.
Yeah, you can really get lost in that one. And just the amount of products that are under AWS right now is kind of mind blowing. All right, so this is something I was actually requested by community members several times, and I'm happy to say that this is supported now. So as part of the lakeFS functionality, we have a lakeFS export, which lets you kind of take changes that were applied to a specific branch and kind of materialize them into another location, typically something like S3 or Azure Blob or GCS. And this is mostly done like to support data consumers who might not be using lakeFS at the moment, and you want to expose that data to them, at least for a given branch. So up until now, this depended on using our Spark client to do the actual heavy lifting of like copying large amounts of data and kind of materializing large amounts of deletes sometimes in a distributed manner. And not everyone is like very proficient in Spark. It's not always part of the toolbox for everyone, especially for like data science or ML use cases. Spark can shine there, but obviously not everyone chooses to use it. So we wanted a standalone tool that does the exact same thing, but without a dependency on something like as big as Spark, which does require some expertise. So we now support what we call Sparkless export, which is basically just a Docker container, which wraps our clone within to do the exact same thing. So you can say, this is my source branch. this is my destination, right? The location in the object store or in my cloud file system, which I want to export to. And then that Docker container would then understand what changed between those two locations and make your destination look like the source, basically. So any delete or update that happened on lakeFS would then be replicated onto that storage location. Right, so this is really cool if you're just doing like data science or you're working at smaller scales and you don't want to set up a Spark client. You now have the option to do the same export functionality as a standalone tool. So definitely something to check out. And I think that's kind of a wrap around the highlights, reminding you all once again that most of these you're free to experiment with and try them yourself, especially now when we have the lakeFS Playground. You can just get started without actually installing anything, or just try it out locally or on your cloud provider. So any which way you like using lakeFS, you can check out all these new features there. And on to you, Paul.
All right, so the the product isn't the only thing that is new and different. You might have noticed we have completely redesigned our website for lakeFest. One of my favorite parts of it is a new community page that's on the website. And if you take out your phone and scan the QR code on the screen, you'll be taken directly to it. And one of the things we did with this redesign of the website and the community page is formalizing values we want to be most prominent in our open source community, which is by developers and for developers. So Adi and I sat down and we came up with 3 primary values. You can see them on the slide here. And I'd like to spend a couple of minutes going through them and explaining them a little bit. So the first is being fully open in code and conversation. We're a community built around open source technology and believe it's the right way for the data community to grow and evolve. We love discussing things in GitHub issues, in public Slack channels, and always providing code for tutorials and content we put out. To give some examples of how this value is reflected. We want to learn and grow together. All of us are learning every day in this very fast-paced, changing environment of big data. So we're always open to chat about best practices and learn from you and give technical advice to help you with the projects you're working on and work better with data. If you have career goals that could be helped by speaking at a conference or a meetup, we'd love to help make that happen when appropriate. And finally, and most importantly perhaps, are compassion and respect in every interaction. So it doesn't matter what your job title is or where you're from. We make sure our community is welcoming to everyone and given the same amount of respect. This becomes, from my experience, especially important as a community grows, and we are stating this to make sure we're aware of this as that happens. So go to the community page. We have the events listed there, these values, a link to our calendar with all the events, and let us know what you think.
It's awesome that we now have like a page dedicated to this on the website with all the information there. I think it's about time.
Yes.
All right, so we talked about past achievements and current achievements. Let's give some spoilers into things that are like planned and coming soon on the roadmap. So I think one of the kind of the first questions that people always ask about lakeFS is, it's cool that it does versioning for the object store, like for the data lake itself. But what about my metadata? This is all in my meta store, right? If I'm doing a SQL query, I'm usually working with the name of a table and not a path on the file system. How does this work with lakeFS? So we've put a lot of work into actually integrating with the Metastore. So nowadays it's much easier to kind of get started working with tables across branches using the integrations that we support. So we know how to work with Hive Metastore. We know how to work with the Glue data catalog as well. But one of the things, like one of our kind of big things to come is a lakeFS managed Metastore, which is also versioned as part of your lakeFS repository. So think about saying, I have a data lake, I have a repository that contains several tables. I click to create a branch. Branches in lakeFS are copy and write, so nothing actually gets copied behind the scenes. And once I created that branch, I can then immediately just run queries against it, right? I would say set ref equals the name of my new branch or my tag or my commit, and then just run whatever transformation or select queries I have, which usually will use a logical, meaningful name of a table, right? And lakeFS behind the scenes would also capture any changes you make to that metadata. So for example, if you're modifying the schema or you're adding new partitions, if you're modifying the data itself, this would be captured inside the commit, right? So even if I go back in history, I can say, hey, well, when was this column added? Show me the commit that actually added this column, right? Not just the data itself, but also the metadata around it. So being able to capture changes to the data and the metadata together as like one holistic atomic unit, this would be something that would be available as part of the lakeFS Metastore. So this is something that's really big. Yeah, it's going to take some time for it to be released. If you have any like ideas or thoughts around this, would love to kind of collaborate with the community to make sure we're building the right thing. And we do support we do plan on supporting compatibility with the Hive Metastore. So this, for the most part, should be kind of compatible with whatever tools you are already using, right? So whether that's Spark, Trino, DBT, which all kind of use the Hive Metastore for metadata management, would ideally want to support all of them. So this is kind of something to stay tuned for. In addition to the Metastore, so we're also planning on kind of enriching our versioning API with new capabilities. So something that's due to be released really, really soon is what we call merge strategies, which something that actually exists also for Git, but I think maybe even makes more sense for data systems. So like a common question is, what do I do when there's a conflict, right? I modified data on my own branch. In the meantime, someone messed around with the data on production, and now I want to merge my changes into it. So if we touch the same objects, that would be a conflict. But sometimes, like I know that I control this data set. I want to apply this set of changes, regardless of whatever happened in the meantime to production. This is especially useful if you're trying to kind of solve production issues or work with corrupted data for some reason. You want to say, always take my changes, the changes that come from my branch if there's a conflict. So merge strategies would be a good first step to kind of do that. So you can decide whether a destination wins or source wins, depending on the branch that you want to override the other one. Another kind of functionality around merge would be to kind of dig deeper into the formats themselves, the data formats. So lakeFS, by definition, is kind of agnostic to whatever format you're using on top, right? So people are using Delta Lake, Iceberg, just Hive tables, and sometimes just unstructured data completely, right? So image files or voice, video. We've seen a lot of crazy things being put on top of lakeFS. But we know that for table formats, specifically Delta and Iceberg, which are like we see more and more nowadays, we want to support deeper, richer functionality. So think about like a Delta table or an Iceberg table, which has compatible changes that were applied on two different branches, right? So maybe Paul is adding a new column, and I'm also adding another column, which doesn't really interfere with what Paul did. So ideally, we should both be able to merge without a conflict here. And this is something that we support on, and we plan on supporting in the future, being able to kind of dig deeper into those formats to provide a better user experience. So that's soon to come. Additionally, rebase functionality, right? So this is like the age-old debate of whether you want to preserve history or you don't want. Do you want to always fast forward or not, rebase or not? take 2 engineers, put them in the room. They'll have 3 different opinions at least on what's the correct way of doing it. But we want to enable whatever kind of makes sense for data teams, the way they want to work. So Rebase is currently not supported in the API. We do plan on supporting it in the future, right? So soon to come is Rebase as well. Paul, what am I missing? What other like interesting things are headed that I haven't spoken about?
Related to the Metastore or
In general for lakeFS, or maybe something you'd like to see being added.
I would be very interested in something around sparkless export personally.
So you should check it out because that's already available. If you
is.
have more feature requirements for the sparkless export, so this is a good time. This is still kind of new and shaping, so do check it out. You can use the playground if you want to get a very recent lakeFS version. So yeah, something to look forward to.
Cool.
All right, so this is in terms of functionality. Passing the baton on to you to talk about events coming up.
Yes, so conferences are back this year, not all virtual, which is exciting. We're going to be speaking at a number of conferences, just even in the first half in the next couple months. So I'm going to be at Data Council Austin in a couple weeks. If you're going, hit me up. Love to say hi. Would love to chat. We're going to be at the Kafka Summit and QCon in April, and we're going to have a noticeable presence at the Data and AI Summit in June, which I'm very much looking forward to. So, hope you can make it, and would love to see you there. If not, look out for recordings of our sessions that you can watch online after.
Yeah, so some interesting things that are going to be presented at these events. Not all of them specifically about lakeFS, which is also kind of interesting, but definitely from the community and from the team. All right, so before we go into questions and kind of input from the comments on LinkedIn and on YouTube, Paul, is there anything you feel we should say or that we haven't discussed?
No, let's get. I saw we got some questions. Let's take a look at some of those.
All right, so I'll kick things off. Let's see, I have a long list here. Ravik is asking if there's swag to be won. Paul, you've done a very poor job answering the quiz, I have to say. I was expecting you to be very accurate and know exactly how many lines of code actually changed in 3 months. So no swag for you, but we should definitely give out some swag to the community, especially people who have tuned in.
Yes,
what do you think?
I agree with that. Chandrakanth has been very active in for this call, and I'll be in touch for sure.
Good idea. Right. Now, they're also asking a question. Do you have plan on the roadmap to release lakeFS as Kubernetes OpenShift operator to drive adoption? So that is a very good question. So right now we have our own lakeFS Helm chart, which lets you set up lakeFS on Kubernetes pretty easily. We don't have an operator. We haven't really seen a very specific need or call for it. So if you feel the Helm chart is not enough, let me just pull up a link for it as well so people can check it out. For lakeFS. So there's the installation guide, which I can put here. One second. There it is. All right, so if you follow that link, there are specific instructions on how to set it up on Kubernetes using the Helm chart. It should be a pretty straightforward effort. Definitely open issues or talk to us on Slack if you feel this experience could be improved. We're very much looking to kind of reduce the friction of starting to get the value from lakeFS. So that's a very valid question. If you feel an operator would be the way to go, I'd be more than happy to hear about it. We're also getting some comments about lakeFS managed Metastore, which we are really excited about. I think that's definitely something to kind of look forward to. And Ravit was asking, will this happen weekly or monthly now? So that's a good question. So up until now, we kind of waited for like notable changes to be kind of aggregated, and then like we'll have a lot to talk about. I think we should maybe open it to, I guess, a more of a tight schedule, right? So let people from the community also kind of tune in and be part of the conversation. I think we can do more. What do you think, Paul?
I think I need the chance to redeem myself sooner than later for the quiz. So
next time it's going to be different questions. I won't let you cheat.
Sounds good. For the record, for the PR question, I know we don't call them PRs, but I thought it included like if you do a merge operation within lakeFS.
Oh, that's why you guessed such a high number then.
That's why I guessed the high number, yeah.
All right, that makes more sense. Okay, so my bad this time. You would have said 209 exactly if I phrased it right, though, right?
Maybe. We'll never know.
We'll never know.
It's a lot of pressure. Can't be sure. But I agree. This has been fun. I've enjoyed this. We'll definitely do it more often than we have. We'll get some new cast of characters up here as well. Won't be me and Oz every time. So yeah, I think this has been great. Oz, any last things you want to say?
Oh, so just noticing there's one last question. We just put it on screen for a second. So he's asking, is there a plan to provide an enterprise support for lakeFS from Treeverse, or do you have support offered already? So if you check out lakefs.io, so we are in the works for releasing an early beta, soon to be lakeFS Cloud, which is a managed lakeFS as a service. This would include support tiers as well. So if you want to get a hosted service that's fully managed and also includes support, that would be the way to go. As for the open source, so we really believe in the power of the community here. So the team itself is very active on Slack, right? So if you check out #help or #beginner questions on our Slack rooms, you would see that most questions get answers like in very fast way, right? Minutes usually, from the community and also from the team. So that's also a way to go if you want to stay with the like open source track. So both options would be possible. All right, and I think with that we can wrap it up. All right, so thanks everyone who tuned in on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Thanks everyone for asking great questions and for being part of the conversation. Looking forward to seeing you on our Slack or GitHub or any other community venue or channel. This was great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Oz. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.